Welcome back. This channel exists because of your support. Subscribe, hit like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Now let's get into the story. The divorce papers were still damp from the printer when I pulled out my phone to call my boss. 3 years of marriage counseling, 8 months of separation, and countless sleepless nights had led to this moment in the lawyer's office on LaSalle Street. Amanda sat across from me, signing her name with the same careful precision she'd used on our wedding certificate 9 years earlier. The difference was, this time she couldn't wait to finish. The conference room felt sterile and cold, nothing like the warm church where we'd promised to love each other for better or worse. Turns out worse included discovering text messages between your wife and her real estate developer friend. Worse included 3 months of denials before she finally admitted to the affair. Worse included watching her move out of our shared condo and into Brandon Mitchell's Lincoln Park townhouse 2 weeks before our divorce became final. "I think we're done here," she said, closing the folder without looking at me. Her wedding ring had already disappeared. Mine was still there, out of habit more than hope. I nodded to our lawyers, shook hands, and walked out into downtown Chicago knowing I'd never see her again. That was March 15th, a Tuesday that felt like the end of everything I'd built over the past decade. By March 17th, I'd given notice at the architectural firm where I'd worked for 6 years, listed my loop condo with a realtor friend, and put a deposit down on a furnished apartment in Milwaukee. People kept asking why I was leaving so fast. My boss offered me a promotion. My friends suggested I take time to think it through. My parents worried I was making emotional decisions that I'd regret later. But sitting in that conference room, watching Amanda sign away our marriage with the same efficiency she brought to her marketing job, I'd realized something important. There was nothing left in Chicago for me. Every restaurant held memories. Every street corner reminded me of what we'd once planned together. Every mutual friend would forever see me as half of a couple that no longer existed. People thought I was running away. Maybe I was. But after discovering those text messages 10 months earlier, after Amanda's denials and excuses, after watching her move in with Brandon Mitchell while we were still technically married, running felt like the smartest thing I'd done in years. Milwaukee was 90 miles north and felt like a different world. Where Chicago was all sharp edges and constant motion, Milwaukee had a gentler pace. The architecture told stories of German immigrants and brewing families, of a city that had reinvented itself without losing its character. I'd found work at Harrison & Associates, a mid-size firm specializing in historic preservation. They were converting old warehouses in the Third Ward into lofts and offices, breathing new life into buildings that had stood for over a century. The work felt meaningful in a way my Chicago projects never had. Instead of tearing down and rebuilding, we were honoring what came before while creating something new. My new apartment sat on Water Street, right in the heart of the historic Third Ward. The building itself was a converted warehouse from the 1800s, with exposed brick walls and tall windows that filled the space with natural light. Walking to work took 15 minutes through tree-lined streets and past small boutiques and galleries. The lakefront was 3 blocks east, offering views that stretched all the way to the horizon. And 2 blocks south, on Jefferson Street, I discovered Clare's Coffee and More. The cafe occupied the ground floor of another restored building, with wide windows facing the street and mismatched furniture that somehow worked perfectly together. The smell of fresh-baked pastries mixed with coffee created an atmosphere that felt like home from my first visit. Clare Brennan had inherited the place from her parents, who'd run it for 30 years before retiring to a golf community in Florida. Clare was probably 35. With auburn hair, she always pulled back in a practical ponytail and green eyes that seemed genuinely interested in her customers' lives. She had that rare ability to remember not just your order, but details about your day, your work, your concerns. I started stopping in every morning for coffee and a blueberry muffin that she made fresh each day using her grandmother's recipe. "You're new around here," she said during my first week, setting my coffee on the counter with a smile that reached her eyes. "Recently relocated from Chicago. Work brought you here? Architecture. Historic preservation, actually." She brightened, her entire face lighting up with interest. "You picked the right neighborhood for that. Half these buildings have stories that go back to the 1800s. My parents bought this place when I was 10, and I grew up hearing about the families who built this area, the businesses that thrived here." "What kind of businesses?" "Everything. leather goods, furniture makers, a brewery that competed with Pabst before Prohibition put them out of business. This building housed a printing company that made sheet music for vaudeville shows. That conversation lasted 15 minutes, and I realized I hadn't thought about Amanda once during the entire exchange. Claire had this way of drawing people into the present moment, making them forget whatever troubles they'd carried through the door. That was the extent of our early conversations, but they gradually grew longer and more personal. Professional, friendly, uncomplicated. Everything my marriage hadn't been. No hidden agendas, no careful word choices designed to avoid triggering an argument, no walking on eggshells around sensitive topics. Just honest conversation between two adults who found each other interesting. By April, I'd settled into a routine that felt more natural than anything I'd experienced in years. My days started with a 6-mile run along the Milwaukee River Trail, past the old industrial buildings that were being converted into condos and office spaces. The running helped clear my head and set a positive tone for each day. After showering and dressing, I'd stop at Claire's for coffee and conversation before heading to the office. Work had become genuinely engaging. Our main project was restoring a 1920s warehouse that would become artist studios and gallery space. The building required careful research into its original design, tracking down architectural plans and period photographs to ensure our renovations honored the structure's history. I spent hours in the Milwaukee Public Library's archives, studying the work of local craftsmen who'd built these neighborhoods with pride and skill that modern construction rarely matched. Evenings were my own. Sometimes I'd cook dinner while listening to jazz or classical music, enjoying the silence that came from not having to negotiate every decision with another person. Other nights, I'd walk down to the lakefront and sit on the rocks, watching cargo ships disappear into the horizon while families played on the beach and couples strolled hand in hand along the water's edge. My phone stayed mostly silent, and I liked it that way. No constant text messages asking where I was or when I'd be home. No need to check in every few hours or explain who I'd had lunch with. The freedom felt almost strange at first, like a weight I'd grown so accustomed to carrying that I didn't notice its absence until it was gone. Kevin Rodriguez called on a Tuesday evening in late April. We'd been roommates at Northwestern, and somehow he'd managed to stay neutral through the entire divorce mess. While other friends had chosen sides or simply disappeared to avoid the awkwardness, Kevin had maintained relationships with both Amanda and me without ever betraying either of our confidences. "How's the Wisconsin experiment going?" he asked, his voice carrying the familiar warmth that had made him such a good friend over the years. "Better than expected. Work's good, city's nice, no complaints. How are things in Chicago?" "Same old chaos. Traffic's getting worse, if that's possible. Listen, I thought you should know something. Amanda and Brandon got engaged." I was stirring pasta sauce for dinner and didn't stop. The wooden spoon continued its circular motion while I processed this information. 10 months ago, this news would have felt like a physical blow. Now it registered as simple fact, no different than hearing about a weather report or sports score. Okay. They had a party at the Chicago Athletic Association last weekend. Pretty big deal, lots of people. Open bar, live music, the whole production. Good for them. Kevin paused, clearly waiting for more reaction. "You're really okay with this? No part of you feels weird about how fast they moved?" I turned off the stove and thought about it honestly. Was I okay with it? The Amanda I'd married would never have moved this quickly, would have agonized over every detail and sought advice from 10 different friends before making such a major decision. But that woman had been replaced by someone I didn't recognize, someone who'd been planning her exit from our marriage long before she'd admitted the affair. "Yeah, Kevin, I really am okay with this. It doesn't affect my life anymore." After we hung up, I realized I hadn't thought about Amanda in over a week. Milwaukee was working. May brought warmer weather and longer conversations with Claire. She'd ask about the renovation projects I was working on, and I found myself describing not just the technical aspects but the stories behind the buildings. We'd also started preliminary work on a second warehouse that had housed a furniture company, and the owner's great-grandson had stopped by that construction site with old photographs showing workers crafting dining room sets that were shipped across the Midwest. I'd asked Claire about the cafe business and her family's history in the neighborhood. Her parents had bought the building in 1998, when the Third Ward was still rough around the edges and rent was cheap enough for a young couple with more dreams than capital. They'd worked 18-hour days for the first 5 years, building a customer base one cup of coffee at a time. "Why didn't you leave for college?" I asked one afternoon while she prepared my usual order. "I did. Went to Madison, studied business. Worked in Milwaukee's financial district for 3 years after graduation. But when Dad had his heart attack, I realized this place meant more to me than any corporate career ever could." Nothing was rushed between us, nothing forced. Just two people getting to know each other without the pressure of timeline or expectation. I'd grown up believing that relationships had to be intense and complicated to be meaningful. With Claire, I was learning that connection could be simple and honest and still run deep. "I've never been married," she mentioned one afternoon while refilling my coffee, the conversation flowing naturally from a discussion about the wedding venue we'd just passed on our walk to the office. "Too busy building this place after Mom and Dad retired." "What about you?" "Divorced. Needed a fresh start." She nodded without prying or asking for details. No follow-up questions about what had gone wrong. No curiosity about why I'd moved so far from everything familiar. Sometimes fresh starts are exactly what we need. That response told me everything I needed to know about Claire's character. She understood that some stories didn't need to be shared until the person was ready to share them. That respect for privacy was more important than satisfying curiosity. I realized I was developing feelings for her, but there was no urgency about it. No drama, no complications, no wondering if she was being completely honest with me. Just healthy attraction to someone who showed up as herself every single day, who ran her business with integrity and treated her customers like extended family. July 4th weekend, Claire invited me to Summerfest, Milwaukee's massive lakefront music festival that draws hundreds of thousands of people over 11 days. We spent Saturday afternoon on the grounds, listening to blues musicians on the Miller Lite Oasis stage while eating bratwurst and drinking beer in the summer sunshine. Her friends were exactly what you'd expect from people who'd grown up in Milwaukee. Genuine, unpretentious, quick to laugh, and slow to judge. "So you're the architect Claire's been talking about," said her friend Sarah, a nurse at Children's Hospital who'd known Claire since elementary school. "She's been talking about me?" "Only every day for the past month," Sarah's husband Mike laughed. "Claire never talks about the guys she meets, so we figured you must be special." I looked over at Claire, who was blushing slightly but not denying anything. The ease of it all struck me. No games, no mixed signals, no wondering where I stood. These people welcomed me into their circle without reservation, treating me like I'd always been part of their group. We were sitting on the grass listening to a jazz quartet when my phone rang. Kevin's name on the screen made me excuse myself and walk toward the lake. "Hey, quick question. Did you get something in the mail from Amanda?" "Like what?" "Wedding invitation. She sent them out yesterday. Figured you might want a heads up since you're not exactly keeping in touch with the Chicago crowd anymore." I felt Claire's friend's eyes on me as I moved further away for privacy. "Wedding invitation?" "August 15th. Chicago Botanic Garden in Glencoe. From what I hear, it's going to be quite the production. 300 guests, full dinner, live band. Brandon's family has serious money, and they're not hiding it." When I got home that evening, the invitation was waiting in my mailbox. Thick, expensive paper with gold embossing. "Amanda Thompson and Brandon Mitchell request your presence at their wedding celebration." The formality of it struck me as completely unlike the Amanda I'd married, who'd wanted a small ceremony with just close family and friends. I dropped it in the kitchen trash without reading the details about venues or reception times. Claire had noticed the phone call. "Everything all right? Just something from my old life. Nothing important anymore." She studied my face. "You sure?" "Very sure." That night, we took a long walk through Veterans Park and talked about our pasts. Not the dramatic stuff, just honest conversation about who we'd been and who we were becoming. When I kissed her for the first time, standing by the lake with the city lights behind us, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. August 15th arrived with perfect summer weather. Lake Michigan stretched like glass toward the horizon, and the temperature held steady in the mid-70s with just enough breeze to keep things comfortable. Claire and I spent the morning setting up for the weekend farmers market, arranging tables and hanging signs for the vendors who sold everything from local honey to handmade jewelry to organic vegetables grown on small farms outside the city. I deliberately kept busy, not wanting to spend the day thinking about what was happening 2 hours south in Chicago. But I found myself checking the time anyway. Ceremony was probably starting around 4. By now, Amanda would be walking down an aisle lined with white roses and baby's breath, wearing a dress that cost more than some people's cars, promising to love Brandon with the same words she'd once said to me. Kevin texted around 4:30. At the wedding. Big production, lots of people, she looks happy. Brandon looks like he won the lottery. I typed back, good for her, and put my phone on silent mode. Claire and I spent the evening watching the sunset from Veterans Park, sitting on a blanket we'd spread on the grass near the lake. We'd packed sandwiches and beer, found a quiet spot away from the families with young children, and talked about everything except weddings. She was telling me about her plans to expand the cafe's catering business, maybe add a small bakery case with pastries made by local bakers, when my phone lit up with an incoming call. Amanda's name on the screen stopped our conversation mid-sentence. I stared at it until the call went to voicemail, the phone buzzing insistently in my hand. Then I looked at Claire, who was watching me with concern but not curiosity. Someone important? She asked quietly. Someone who used to be. The words felt true in a way that surprised me. Amanda had been the most important person in my world for nearly a decade. Now she was someone I used to know, someone who belonged to a different version of my life. The phone rang again. Same name. I declined the call and turned it face down. Ex-wife. Yeah. Claire reached over and took my hand. You don't have to explain. But the phone kept ringing. 3 more calls over the next hour, no voicemails left. I finally turned it off completely and focused on Claire's company, on the lake breeze and the quiet evening we'd planned. The next morning brought 7 missed calls and 2 text messages. The first said, "We need to talk. Something happened." The second, sent 3 hours later, read, "Please, I know you're getting these." I blocked her number and went about my normal Sunday routine. Coffee at Claire's cafe, a long run along the river, grocery shopping, meal prep for the week. Simple, peaceful activities that reminded me why I'd moved here in the first place. Kevin called Tuesday evening. Dude, she's been asking people how to reach you. What people? Mutual friends, people from the wedding. She's saying she needs to talk to you about something important. I was making dinner, chopping vegetables with perhaps more force than necessary. Tell anyone who asks that I'm doing great and to leave me out of whatever this is. You got it. But man, she seemed really upset about something. After we hung up, Claire called to check on me. She'd noticed my mood was off when I'd stopped by the cafe that morning. Want to talk about it? My ex is trying to contact me. I'm handling it. Need anything? Just you being you. That's enough. The LinkedIn message from Jennifer Williams arrived on August 25th, 10 days after the wedding. Amanda's younger sister had always been the more straightforward of the 2 Williams girls, the one who'd called out family members when they were being hypocritical, the one who'd warned me years ago that her sister had a tendency to want what she couldn't have and discard what she already possessed. I think you should know what happened at the wedding reception, her message read. It's been eating at me for over a week, and I finally decided you deserve to hear the truth about why Amanda's been trying to reach you. I called her that evening while Claire was at a restaurant industry meeting with other Third Ward business owners. Michael, thank you for calling. I wasn't sure if you'd want to hear from any of us, given how everything ended. What happened, Jennifer? Well, the ceremony was beautiful. Everything went perfectly, exactly like Amanda planned. Brandon's family spared no expense. The Chicago Botanic Garden looked like something out of a magazine, with white flowers everywhere and string quartet music that probably cost more than most people make in a month. She paused, and I could hear voices in the background. But during the reception, something went wrong. They were doing the traditional toasts. You know how that goes. Best man speech, maid of honor, both sets of parents. Then this family friend, Mr. Peterson, who's known our family for years, got up to speak. He'd been drinking pretty heavily, and I think he was trying to be supportive, but he said something that landed completely wrong. I waited for her to continue, settling into my desk chair and looking out at the street lights beginning to flicker on a long water street. He started talking about marriage being about choices, about how Amanda had always known what she wanted from life. Then he said, and I quote, "Amanda has always been decisive about love. She knew what she wanted when she married Michael, and she knew what she wanted when she chose Brandon. Here's to Amanda, who always follows her heart, even when it means making hard choices." I felt my stomach tighten slightly. Even hearing about it secondhand, I could imagine how that toast would sound to a room full of people who knew about the affair. How did Amanda react? She went completely pale, like someone had slapped her. I was sitting at the head table, maybe 6 feet away, and I watched all the color drain from her face. She tried to smile and raise her glass, but her hands were shaking. Brandon kept asking what was wrong, but she just kept saying it was nothing, that Mr. Peterson had too much to drink. And then, she excused herself from the head table and spent about 20 minutes in the bathroom. When she came back, she looked like she'd been crying. The rest of the reception was miserable for her. She barely talked to anyone, couldn't seem to focus on conversations, kept staring off into space. Brandon was confused as hell, asking family members if they knew what was bothering her. People were whispering, trying to figure out what had upset the bride at her own wedding reception. Jennifer paused again, and I could hear her taking a deep breath. I followed her to the bathroom later that evening, and she was sobbing, really crying, not just wedding day emotions. When I asked what was wrong, she said hearing your name at her wedding reception made her realize what she'd thrown away. She kept saying she'd made a terrible mistake, that she'd convinced herself Brandon was better for her because he was more exciting, more spontaneous, but now she understood that excitement isn't the same thing as love. I processed this information while walking around my apartment. During our conversation, I found myself absently turning the wedding ring I still wore, a habit I'd somehow never broken despite everything that had happened. Jennifer, I appreciate you telling me, but I'm not interested in Amanda's regrets. I figured as much, but I thought you deserved to know why she's been trying to reach you. She's been getting new email addresses and even asked me for your work information. After we hung up, I realized I felt grateful rather than vindicated. Grateful that I'd left when I did. Grateful that her crisis of conscience wasn't my problem to solve. I walked to my bedroom dresser and finally removed my wedding ring, placing it in the back of a drawer where I wouldn't see it every day. Claire and I had dinner that night at a small Italian place in the 3rd Ward. I told her about the conversation with Jennifer, about the wedding reception drama, about Amanda's attempts to reconnect. How does that make you feel? She asked. Relieved. 6 months ago, I might have felt bad for her. Now I just feel lucky that I'm not there dealing with it. Claire smiled. You've changed since I met you. How so? You're more settled, more yourself, like you're not carrying around someone else's problems anymore. She was right. I'd stopped defining myself by what Amanda had done to our marriage and started building something entirely my own. September brought more information from Jennifer, who'd been talking to mutual friends and family members. Brandon, it turned out, had a pattern. He'd left his previous girlfriend for Amanda, and before that, he'd done the same thing to someone else. Serial relationship jumper, always looking for the next better option. Amanda's starting to see the signs, Jennifer told me during our second phone call. Working late, phone secrecy, getting defensive about simple questions. Sound familiar? It did sound familiar. Exactly like the months before I'd found those text messages that ended our marriage. Is she asking for advice? I asked. She's asking about you, wanting to know how you're doing, if you're seeing anyone, if you ever talk about her. I think she wants to reconnect, maybe not romantically, but as friends. I shared this conversation with Claire that evening while we walked through the historic district, looking at the old buildings I'd been working to restore. What do you think? I asked her. I think you already know what you want to do. She was right. I had no interest in being Amanda's friend, her support system, or her reminder of what stable relationships looked like. I'd moved forward, and I intended to keep moving forward. October brought a new email address and a long message from Amanda herself. 3 paragraphs about making mistakes, missing our friendship, needing someone who knew the real her. She talked about feeling alone and confused, about questioning her choices, about remembering the good times we'd shared. I read it once, then showed it to Claire over morning coffee. What are you going to do? She asked. Nothing. The person she's describing doesn't exist anymore. I'm not the same guy who tried to save our marriage for 3 years. I'm not interested in saving her from her current situation. I deleted the email and blocked that address too. Kevin called a few days later with more updates I hadn't asked for. Amanda was asking mutual friends for my work information, wanting to reach out directly. Kevin, I need you to stop giving me updates about her situation. I'm moving forward, not looking back. You got it, man. I just thought you should know. I appreciate your friendship, but this part of the conversation needs to be over. He understood. Kevin had always been good at respecting boundaries. Thanksgiving week. Claire invited me to spend the holiday with her extended family. Her parents had flown up from Florida to join siblings, cousins, and the whole crowd gathered at her aunt's house in Wauwatosa. Normal family chaos, kids running around, football on TV, too much food, and too much laughter. I was helping Claire's uncle carve the turkey when my phone rang. My former colleague from Chicago, someone I'd worked with for 5 years. "Michael, sorry to bother you. Amanda Thompson showed up at the office looking for you. Should I give her your information?" I stepped outside onto the back porch. What did she want? She seemed pretty desperate. Said she needed to talk to you about something important. Started crying when I told her you'd moved and I couldn't share your contact information without permission. Tell her I wish her well, but we have nothing to discuss. Will do. How are you doing up there? Really good. Better than I've been in years. When I came back inside, Claire was standing in the kitchen holding 2 cups of coffee. She'd overheard the conversation. "You handled that well," she said. "I meant it. I do wish her well. I just don't want to be part of whatever she's going through." That evening, surrounded by Claire's family, listening to stories and watching old family videos, I realized how completely my life had changed. 8 months ago, I'd been sitting in a lawyer's office signing divorce papers that ended one chapter of my life. Now I was building something entirely new, something honest and uncomplicated and genuinely mine. December brought the first real snow and Kevin's visit to Milwaukee. He'd never been here, wanted to see what had drawn me away from Chicago. We walked through the 3rd Ward, ate lunch at Claire's cafe, towards some of the renovation projects I'd been working on. He met Claire, saw my apartment, experienced the life I'd built here. "This is nice, man. Really nice. You seem different." "Different how?" "Relaxed. Like you're not waiting for the other shoe to drop anymore." We were sitting at a brewery overlooking the Milwaukee River when he hesitated, then spoke carefully. "I know I said I'd stop giving you updates, and I meant it. But I thought you should know one thing, then I'll never bring her up again. She filed for separation from Brandon last week." I took a sip of beer and watched the snow falling outside. "I hope she finds what she's looking for." "That's it. No questions, no curiosity?" "That's it." Kevin nodded slowly. "You really have moved on." "Completely." The next evening, Claire and I were planning a New Year's trip to Door County, spreading tourism brochures across the kitchen table and debating between cozy bed and breakfasts in Fish Creek versus modern hotels in Ephraim. When she brought up Kevin's visit, I liked him. He seems like a genuine friend, the kind you can count on when things get difficult. The best. He stayed loyal to both of us through the whole divorce, never took sides, never repeated conversations, or tried to manipulate either one of us into feeling guilty about our choices. He seemed surprised by how well you're doing here. I pulled her closer on the couch, enjoying the weight of her against my side. Everyone back home expected me to be bitter or angry or sitting around waiting for Amanda to realize her mistake and come back. But I wasn't running away from something when I moved here. I was running toward something better. "And did you find it?" I kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of her shampoo mixed with the coffee aroma that seemed to follow her everywhere. "I found you. I found work that matters, projects that honor the past while creating something useful for the future. I found a place where I can be myself without explaining or defending or apologizing for choices I didn't make." Outside, snow continued falling, covering Milwaukee in clean white silence that muffled the usual city sounds. Inside, we planned our future together, 2 people who'd chosen each other honestly and completely, without games or deception or hidden agendas. My phone sat silent on the kitchen counter, face down next to the Door County brochures. No missed calls, no desperate messages, no attempts to pull me back into a past that no longer existed. Amanda could work through her marriage problems however she needed to. Brandon could continue his pattern of moving from relationship to relationship whenever something shinier appeared. Chicago could keep spinning without me, the city where I'd once thought I'd spend my entire adult life, now feeling like a place I'd visited years ago. I'd found my fresh start in Milwaukee, in meaningful work restoring beautiful old buildings, in a relationship built on truth rather than convenience or excitement. 8 months after signing those divorce papers in that sterile conference room, I finally understood what it meant to be chosen by someone who meant it, someone who saw me clearly and decided she wanted to build something lasting together. That was enough. That was everything I'd been searching for without even knowing it. The story of my marriage was over, filed away in legal documents and fading memories. The story of my life was just beginning, written in morning conversations over coffee, evening walks along the lake, and quiet Sunday mornings when the future stretched ahead like an open road leading somewhere worth going. Some people spend their whole lives trying to fix what's broken. I'd learned it was better to start over and build something new. Dear listeners, that's our ending. If it resonated, subscribe to support the channel. See you next time.